Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, permit me, if you may, to commence my presentation here this evening in this honorable House by first and foremost thanking the Almighty God for having me here. I have an even more profound conviction in His presence, as just a few months ago I came face to face with a reality that we all one day must, and I profoundly respect and believe in His presence. So I'll thank Him for having me here today in this honorable House. But before I commence my presentation, Mr. President, I would like first of all to respond quickly to some of the comments that were made by some of the members who spoke before me. I will invoke the old accounting principle, the LIFO principle, last in, first out, and so I will respond swiftly to Senator Daniel, some of the comments that he made. Mr. President, Senator Daniel lamented the fact that the government was paying such huge sums in interest payments. And the demeanor, and he was not the only one, Senator Isaac did the same thing. And the demeanor with which you said it, you would have sworn as if it was a curse to honor your own debts. These interest payments are not payments, are not debts rather, the payments for debts that were accrued by this government only. They were payments that are made from a totality of debts that have been there. Debts mature. I said not only. Listen, not only. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because government after government, we have responsibilities. The debts of the previous government becomes the debts of this government. So when you talk about a deficit, when you talk about the national debt, it is not debt that is incurred by the sitting government. It is a totality of the debt. Okay? So when you make interest payments, you are honoring your obligations. That is what prudent financial management is all about. Sometimes you cannot pay your debt. So you refinance the debt, and it comes with a cost. And every government that I have known has had to do it, including yours. We talk about, you would have sworn as if that a government is not supposed to honor its responsibilities. We issue bonds. This is the primary way in which we finance our budget, especially our capital projects. We make promises to people. If you buy my bonds, I will give you X amount of interest at a certain time. These bonds, they mature. And when they mature, you have to pay. It's called interest payments, interest on principal. That's what it's called. You have to pay. So don't make it seem as if the government is paying so much in interest, 160 million. It would be interesting. It would be very interesting. And had I had more time, I would have found out how much of that figure is attributable to the former government as opposed to this government. And you would find that the interest payments that you speak about, the majority of it goes to the works or the borrowings of the previous government. Speak the truth. and the truth shall set you free. Mr. President, when we argue or we debate in this House, I've heard many members talk about fair and honest discussion, fair and honest discourse. And, you know, I come here with this, with honest intention, and I do debate to the best of my abilities and as honestly as I can. Senator Daniel said that there is no allocation for the youth. No allocation for the youth. In other words, we had let down the youth. What happened to the youth? There's nothing in this budget for the youth. This is a blatant lie. This is misleading. It is disingenuous. And you should apologize to the young people of this country for trying to mislead them. You should be ashamed of yourself. I'd refer you to the estimates, Mr. President, the estimates at page 460 and 61. You will see under the Ministry of Youth for Sports organizations, youth organizations, that every single youth council in this country, every single one of them has an allocation. Every single one of them has an allocation that goes to them. Some as much as $250,000. Okay? Every single one of them. So it is incorrect to even suggest that nothing is being done to the youth or there's no allocation for the youth. So you should apologize. Love is never to say you're sorry. Say sorry if you love them. Apologize to the youth. Mr. President, if I have to respond to everything that Senator Daniel has said, then I would not have any time for my own presentation. Mr. President, Senator Isaac, I note that today was her inaugural budget presentation. And in my humble view, she has failed. She has failed miserably. Disingenuity, falsities, inaccurate information. She says that there were 3 consecutive years of negative growth. 3 consecutive years of negative growth. So I ask, well, who's responsible? 3 consecutive years of negative growth. The whole idea, this is what she said, the whole idea of, how should you call it, says she wants a balanced budget. Well, the opposite to a balanced budget is a deficit budget. And let me remind you that the whole idea of deficit financing started under the United Workers' Party. It was you all. And I'll remind you that in 2012, a mere 5 months after this government, the government which I'm a part of, took over the reins of governance in this country, at our very first budget presentation, our very first 5 months after we assumed power, we had a $328.8 or $0.2 million deficit to deal with. Did we incur it? Was it our doing? We found it. Well, part of it. because our policies necessarily would involve a certain amount of financing, which, of course, would have increased the debt. But deficit spending or deficit financing started under your government, not the Workers' Party government. That is a fact. Say it. So do not make it seem as if it is this government that is responsible. We are in this situation because we have to continue financing the deficit, helping to reduce it. Sadly, Mr. President, Senator Isaac went on to state, said that she lamented the fact that the NICE program, university grads working on the NICE. So what's wrong with that? Isn't the NICE program a national initiative to create employment? That's what it is. It is an agency designed to train and to create employment. It does not specify at what level. And if you want to compare, can you show me any country in the world, anyone in the world? And I don't doubt that there may exist one, maybe two, where there are university grads who are not unemployed. Are there any country in this entire world where there are university grads who are not unemployed? In fact, I think we're doing a good thing. We're catering for everybody. And the NICE program, you ask me, is doing a fantastic job in terms of creating opportunities for persons who are unemployed. The NICE program should not be a stopping point. It should be a starting point. You start there, then you move out. You start there, you're assigned to an established company. You learn, you prove yourself. You go on your own, or you may be recruited. It's a starting point. What is wrong with that? We're not able to give unemployed people an unemployed stipend. We're not so rich, and we don't pay. Enough of us don't pay taxes for that. So we do that. So we do the best that we can. That is what we do, the best that we can. It's this government exercising its social responsibility in the best way that our resources allow us to. Mr. President, I'd like to respond to a statement that was made by Senator King in his presentation. In his critique of the estimates, or the budget statement by the Prime Minister, or rather the estimates rather, he said that there was nothing transformative about the budget. I don't think that you honestly meant that, Senator King. You didn't mean that. I know you didn't. I think that you may have gotten a little carried away in all the excitement and your adrenaline was flowing, so you made a statement. But you could not mean that. You know why? Because he corrected his own self. Later on in his own presentation, he applauded my colleague Senator Fletcher. He applauded the work that he's doing in his championing the cause of the awareness to climate change and renewable energy. He said, he described it as truly transformative. He exclaimed, now that is transformative. That is the transformation that he was talking about. So he could not have meant it. But I will point him to other initiatives in this budget that, of course, is transformative. I'll refer to the YAP program, YAP, Youth Agricultural Entrepreneurial Program, where we're training young people, training young farmers, making land available for them, training them in greenhouse management, setting up greenhouses, giving them an opportunity to enter an area that is absolutely necessary. That is transformative. I'll refer him again to the Sites and Services Program, a program that is financed by this government to the tune of about, I think, $3.2 million, if you ask me. That is transformative because it creates employment. And I will tell you a little more about this program in my substantive presentation. It creates employment. It makes land available to first-time landowners, first-time would-be landowners. That is transformative because land is a source of economic empowerment. It leads to that. It transforms lives. That is transformative. So, Mr. President, having said this, I want to say, Mr. President, that it has been a challenging 3.5 years for this government, and of course for our country. As we continued in our transition, Mr. President, to turn this economy around, as we continue to improve on our social, our educational, and the physical infrastructure of this country, and that is all in the quest to secure a better future for ourselves and for our children. I dare say, Mr. President, that the road has not been an easy road. It has been a very challenging road. But we have not ever felt the need not to travel that road. Instead, we aim to make that road a lot smoother. So we stay in the course. We are staying the course. We are staying the course. And very soon, in fact already, we are starting to see the results of the hard work that we've put in and we are continuing to put in as a government. Mr. President, since this government took over the reins of power some 3.5 years ago, every effort has been made to position our economy so that the best possible advantage could be achieved for the people of this country. You may recall, Mr. President, that upon the assumption of power by this government, and in our very first budget presentation, I said it a while ago, that was in 2012, 2013, a mere 5 months after the assumption of power, and in our very first budget presentation, we had an overall budget deficit of $328 million. 328.8. Call it $329 million, if you want. 1 year later, 2013, 2014, we were able to further reduce that figure to $213.5 million, which represents a decrease by $115.3 million. This deficit, 213.5 million, in this last financial year, 2014-2015, it was further reduced to the current 138.8 million. This is truly remarkable, Mr. President. It is noteworthy. And if members in this chamber are honest enough, you will say, this is remarkable. Because this type of reduction does not happen ordinarily in consecutive years. So whether you are United Workers' Party or Labour Party or Flabo or Labour, if it is good, say it's good. If it is good, say it's good. So I want to thank the lead, Mr. President, in thanking the Prime Minister and the Minister for Finance for this noteworthy accomplishment. Mr. President, these consecutive reductions did not just happen, but in fact they bear testimony to the sound and the deliberate fiscal decisions that were made by this government under the guidance of the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, the Honorable Kennedy Anthony, who, incidentally, if members can recall, during his last budget statement, budget address, he asked that we as a people make a conscious effort, which he said would require a shared sacrifice, if we were to restore our country back to good economic health. A shared sacrifice. Mr. President, the government, this government, has done an extraordinarily good job at holding this economy together. It has done so by averting a major crisis, a crisis necessitating the intervention of the IMF and its most dreaded restructuring programs. I'll be honest to say that clearly the situation, the economic situation, is not perfect, but the prospects look good. The prospects look good. And as a government, we are continuing to work even harder, continuing to work towards the path of economic stability. The successive deficit reductions did not come easy. These gains came against a backdrop where it has become increasingly difficult to finance our excesses. It has become increasingly difficult, Mr. President, to finance our excesses through the regional securities market and other financial institutions. And that is because the market has been very unresponsive towards purchasing our bonds. It has been very unresponsive. Has been. Language. Has been. I'll tell you. Listen. Learn something. It has been very unresponsive, and that is not only in regard to St. Lucia. It is a situation that exists throughout the region. And that is not owing to something or how we have handled our affairs. In part, it is because, honesty here, of course, the world economic crisis, that has a part to play with it. It is because of the manner in which other regional governments who are not as prudent in the management of their financial affairs or the economies as St. Lucia has been, that they have somewhat instilled a bit of uncertainty and trepidation in the hearts of would-be investors. You would recall, Mr. President, that there are certain countries, I believe Grenada, and I stand corrected, who had asked investors to take a haircut on their investments. So when that happens, what do you think, how do you think investors would respond? They'd get cold feet. You would say, I want all my money. I'm not buying bonds. This is the OACS, a single currency. Peter pays for Paul. Learn that. Yeah, I'll tell you. Peter pays for Paul. But we are continuing on a solid path to fiscal restructuring. And we are doing it, Mr. President, by employing deliberate fiscal policy measures that are beginning to send signals to the wider market and investors alike that St. Lucia is fiscally stable again and therefore a worthy business partner. Mr. President, allow me, if you may, to labor this point for a bit longer, just a slight bit longer, and to emphasize the fact that as a government, we have made tremendous strides in safeguarding our economy, and that is despite tremendous fiscal pressures brought on by a challenging and previously declining world economy and a lethargic investment environment. But despite all of these fiscal challenges, Mr. President, we have continued to improve on our traditional bread and butter sectors. Tourism, agriculture, sports. We are continuing to make improvements. We have done so well in the management of our economy, Mr. President. And it is commendable that to date, despite all of the fiscal pressures, despite our neighbors having to ask investors to take haircuts, in this country, we have not fired not one single worker. We have not sent not one single worker home. Nor have we laid off not one single worker. Nor have we cut the salaries of one single civil servant. That is commendable. That is more. That is more than a lot of our neighbors can say in the region. And it's good, say it's good. Prudent financial management. That's what it is. Prudent. Fact. Not one worker laid off, not one worker sent home, not one salary cut. Every other island has had to do it, except St. Lucia. Prudent financial management.
Senator, I don't mean to cut short your time, but you have 15 minutes left.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
20 minutes. Yeah.
Leader of government business.
Mr. President, I humbly move that we suspend Standing Order 35-3. Mr. President, I humbly submit that I invoke Standing Order 35-3 to enable the suspension of Standing Order 35-1 to allow the honorable member to have an additional 20 minutes for his presentation.
Senators, the question is that you invoke Standing Order 35-3 to suspend Standing Order 35-1 to allow the Honorable Minister an additional 20 minutes in which to conclude his presentation. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many who are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with your permission, I want to state, and I know members opposite do not like to hear it. I know that some of my other colleagues has mentioned them earlier on today. But please allow me just to state a few positive features of our fiscal operations and performance. And this is coming from the review of the economy 2014, I believe it's on page 9. That central government fiscal performance improved during the fiscal year 2014-2015 in that there was a reduction in the overall deficit from 213.5 million, or 5.8% of GDP, in 2013-2014, went down to 138.8 million, or 3.7% of GDP in 2014-2015. The current account improved to a surplus of $43.1 million, following 2 consecutive years of deficits. Our total current revenue and grants increased and is estimated to have expanded by 5.2% to $970.4 million. Our current revenue grew by 5.8% to $916.9 million. Income tax receipts increased by 1.9%, following 2 consecutive years of contractions. Revenue from individual income tax, which accounts for 45% on income, moved from an average of 38% in the last 10 years to 45% in the fiscal year 2014-2015. And receipts from individual income tax rose by 3.1%. And that was due mainly to the increase in salaries given to public officers in 2013 and also due to the improved efficiencies in the collection of the tax. This is commendable. Corporate taxes grew by 28.1%, following 4 consecutive years of decline. Now, what does this say? This says that this is a government who knows what it's doing. And as far as managing the resources, managing the finances of this country, employing fiscal measures to bring about desired results. Clearly, these have to be considered desired results because you're consolidating, you're improving revenue, you're creating efficiencies, you're reducing the deficit. Those are positives, and it cannot be denied. Mr. President, these things do not just happen on its own, but rather they happen again, as I said, through the deliberate manipulation or implementation of good fiscal policies. And allow me to state briefly, Madam President, that our capital projects are financed mainly by the issuance of treasury bills and bonds. These instruments are traded on the regional securities market. And as I have said earlier, that in the last few years, there has been much trepidation amongst would-be investors and investors alike regarding the purchasing of our bonds, our instruments. And as a result, it became increasingly difficult to raise much-needed capital on the securities market. And more than that, the prospects of rolling over mature debt seemed even bleaker. But what is important, and that is instructive, and I will make this statement to answer Senator Ezekiel Joseph's question to me. He says, so why do you want to issue more bonds? How are you going to raise the money? We have to be honest. 2 years ago, 2013, 2014, it was very difficult. In fact, the projected revenue, or the revenue projected to be raised by the issuance of treasury bills and bonds was not achieved. It was not achieved totally. But in the last financial year, although we were not successful in raising all of the monies that we were projecting to raise by way of the issuance of bonds, we fell short by only $6 million. Only $6 million. We fell short by $6 million, which in itself is an increase in the amount, represents an increase in the amount of revenue raised by way of issuance of financial instruments. But the clearest signal, however, that St. Lucia is back, the clearest signal lies in the fact that we were able to roll over 100% of our maturing debt. We were able to roll over 100% of our maturing debt, which signals the fact that investors now have a renewed confidence in our economy. Because if they were not confident, they would have said, give me my money, I'm not taking a chance on you. So by rolling over the investments, it simply says we are confident. We can sleep good at nights. We know you will do good. We've seen the signs that your economy is back, and so we're staying with you. Bravo to the folks at the Ministry of Finance and the Prime Minister for managing our fiscal and our economy in such an exemplary way, in renewed investor confidence in our country. Mr. President, I have highlighted, Madam President, my apologies. I have highlighted the performance of our local economy. However, we can more accurately assess our performance by comparing ours to that of our regional counterparts. And according to the review of the economy 2014 at page 9, the world economy remained flat, registering growth at 3.4%, the very same rate as in 2012-2013. The world economy, essentially they're referring to the Americas and the Eurozone countries. But closer to home in the region, page 14 of the review of the economy 2014. The regional economies, all of them, save for St. Vincent, experienced modest growth. The exception being St. Kitts, registering growth of 5.4%. My friend on the other side would say, so how come you're not registering positive growth? We did register growth, declining negative growth. Yes, that is growth. But what is instructive here is that all of these countries, all of them, fact, all of these countries have themselves been the subject of restructuring programs, whether by the IMF or otherwise. And they've been under these programs, not just for 1 year, but for years. So now, it means that they have made the type of sacrifices that we as a country has not made. And so, the benefit of these sacrifices are starting to show. But although we have not endured such restructuring programs, and we have not been the subject of them, our economy is turning around. And like the Prime Minister, I will stand here today and predict, if God should spare my life, if I'm not here, say that Stanley Felix, Senator Felix, predicted also that this economy would register positive economic growth come 2016, 2017. Mr. President, Madam President, my apologies. Mr. President, the attractiveness of our country lies not only in how it performs economically, but its appearance goes a long way towards conveying the right sentiments to would-be investors. Its appearance must convey the right vibe. When you enter a country, you know instantly, as soon as you step out of the airport, whether you want to stay a day, 2 days, 3 days, a year, or you want to live there. That is the type of vibe that the country, the appearance of the country gives out. This was not the case in 2006. We had a broken country. We had a broken country. And I'm not blaming any government for the fact that the country was broken. Okay? 2007, sorry, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It was broken. I'm not blaming any government for that. They are natural disasters. These things happen. I'm honest. What I will blame the former government for is that is on their performance in restoring this country to good physical health. And despite them spending millions of dollars, there was little or no evidence that anything had been done. We had broken culverts, collapsed roads, landslides, massive siltation of rivers, and there were some persons who could not go back and forth to their home properly because they had nowhere to pass. Millions were spent with no visible results. There were contracts, Madam President, that were awarded to relatives of the then minister. We know who he is, and the then Minister for Communications and Works, as it was called then. That's Guy Joseph. He said it, he admitted. My brother was working for 3 years, and he still didn't finish the job. That's what he said. Works were paid for with no visible results. There were unprecedented high rates which were paid for works which otherwise could never have fetched such high rates. Many contracts were awarded without any form of tendering. There was no real accountability and transparency. It was pure chaos. There was a breakdown in governance. And I say these things. These are facts. It's recorded, it's documented. I say these things, Mr. President, because if we forget where we came from, we will repeat the same mistakes that were made before. Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. And that sort of behavior, Mr. President, was not only evident in the Ministry of Communications and Works, as it was called then, but it was replicated in the Constituency Development Program, the CDP. Corruption was rampant in this country. I draw the correlation in terms of performance governance and infrastructure. Corruption was a term that was synonymous with the United Workers' Party government. I don't hide to say it. It's a fact. It's a fact. Mr. President, because I don't want you to forget it. I don't want you to forget. We must not forget it. In my last budget presentation, I spoke on this issue. Honesty. The review of the financial operations of town and village and rural councils. You don't want to hear it, but you will hear it. It's factual. I spoke on this issue, and I will continue to speak on it for as long as those whose responsibility it is to act upon such information choose not to do so. The review of the financial operations of town and village and rural councils. An audit was done of all of those councils, and the findings are contained therein. It's right here. It's here. Here. And the veracity of that document ought to be tested. So those whose responsibility it is to act. They need to act. Mr. President, in that review, irrefutable evidence was produced, suggesting numerous acts of criminality and financial impropriety. So when you say, every year I say the same thing, because it hurts. We're supposed to serve our country honestly, diligently, with integrity and transparency. And that was not evident there. I will not forget it. And some of the findings of that report, but not limited to. There were opening of bank accounts used for transferring huge sums of Taiwanese and other monies from consolidated fund and otherwise. Monies were paid for work which was never done. There were disbursements of monies that were not accounted for, overvalued contracts. Accounts were opened without proper authority, and the list goes on. How could that be right? How can we just turn our backs and pretend that it never happened? I refuse to do that. I refuse to do that. In much the same way that for more than 6 years, you talk about Grindberg, Rochamel. Well, I'm talking about that. I'm talking about that. Improprieties, financial impropriety, acts of criminality. This was what obtained during the reign of the United Workers' Party. They squandered and misappropriated monies that were earmarked for the infrastructural development of this country. But to date, there is very little evidence to suggest that much of those monies were in fact used for the purpose for which it was intended. So today, and I want this recorded, and I want it broadcasted, so help me in the media. So today, on behalf of the people of St. Lucia, I am making a public plea to the Director of Public Prosecutions, whose responsibility it is under our Constitution to determine whether, in fact, based on the evidence before her, that the laws of this country has been transgressed, and if she so finds, to exercise the mandate given to her under the Constitution. I believe, Mr. President, that the people of St. Lucia has a right to know, and I will not stop until there is some response from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We, the people of this country, has a right to good, fair, and transparent governance, and we should never accept anything less. I want to, at this juncture, publicly congratulate my colleague minister, the Minister of Infrastructure, Ports and Transport, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, for the fantastic job that he and his ministry has done over the past 3 years. Despite the many fiscal challenges, he has been able to restore the physical infrastructure of this country and return this country to a sense of normalcy. This was done by undertaking a number of different programs, on some of which are as follows. And I shall go through them very quickly with no great description, time being a factor. The Bridges and Culverts program, Mr. President, a major completed project was the Bardowage Bridge, which cost some $9.2 million. Under the Alba Finance projects, we saw the construction of the Dimali Bridge and the Granvier Bridge in Dennery, more well known as the Alba Bridge. There were bridges built in Diamond. Under this disaster recovery program, we saw works done on the Badlil. Of course, remember how it was? Right now, all of the slopes have been repaired, the lanes have been repaired, and the road is very motorable at this particular point in time. Some other programs, time constraining here. We have the Sulphur Springs Road. We have the Sulphur Springs Road, Mr. President, which should be complete in the next month or so. We have the North-South Link Road. Of course, a consultation had been undergoing, and I think this consultation is due to come to an end sometime in June of 2015. Sometime of June in 2015. On our feeder road programs, Mr. President, 38 kilometers of roads will be improved or strengthened. The general road riding condition on the targeted roads, the intervention is expected to significantly improve the quality of those roads. The other bridges, Asso Canal Bridge, the Sanssouci Bridge was reinforced and repaired, and there are lots of other roads to be built under our feeder road program. Some of those roads are in dire need of repair, and the biggest of them all, the Castries-Grosville Highway, which we've spoken about earlier. This project will cost some 160 million, 7 million of which have been allocated in this fiscal year, and I believe, of course, we have the financing from the Kuwaiti Fund. The details of this project, Mr. President, is pretty much well known. The surrounding roads would be targeted first, and they include roads in Castries to Grosville, Bellarosa, Bonterre, Bonterre to Moshi, Moshi to Vesique, Beausejour to Bellarosa, Union Grand Riviere to Choc Roundabout, Union Grand Riviere to Grand Riviere Bridge, Grand Riviere Bridge to Norbert Corinth, Corinth Marisil to Norbert Corinth, Corinth Bradouage to Norbert Corinth, Moshi Bradouage to Moshi Vesique, Aquatic Center to Moshi, Bonterre Access Road, and Castries-Grosville to Bellarosa, Bonterre. Mr. President, allow me now to move to my ministry quickly, the Ministry of Physical Development, Housing, and Urban Renewal. We've had our challenges. Our budget has been cut like every other ministry as part of our fiscal consolidation. But nonetheless, we undertake some very crucial projects in this ministry. In this financial year, Mr. President, we are going to be paying attention to our cemeteries. Of course, it is the responsibility of the Ministry of Social Transformation, but our responsibility lies within the identification of suitable sites and the suitability of those sites to establish modern cemeteries. I am happy to note that we have located and identified land which we hope will become our new northern cemeteries. As you know, that there's an acuteness of land in the north of the island where there's been a greater expansion of residential development. And with half of the island's death recorded in the north of the island, and the main cemetery, the Shock Cemetery, reaching near maximum capacity, the need to identify suitable lands, Mr. President, for the establishment of a cemetery in the north of the island is a matter which requires urgent attention. So in that regard, we have identified a suitable site at Beausejour for the establishment of the Northern Cemetery, and this site totals some 57.7 acres, which is basically Crown property along with private property, which is acquired or is in the process of being acquired. The intention, therefore, is to establish a cemetery in this location, and we are waiting financing. I note in the estimates under the Ministry of Social Transformation, there is an amount allocated to undertake soil testing and drainage on the site that we have already identified. The intention, Mr. President, is to focus on the establishment of larger, centralized, and modern cemetery facilities with a wider sphere of influence, as opposed to the establishment of multiple individual community facilities. In this regard, and you have heard the Minister for Social Transformation during his presentation, that the invitations, or rather the government is soliciting interested and capable entities to manage or present proposals for the management of those cemetery, this cemetery, and others similar to come. Our land policy, the revised land policy, is ongoing. This policy is intended, Mr. President, to achieve 4 major strategic outcomes. It's intended to conserve and manage land resources while reducing risk and vulnerability. It is intended to optimize the contribution of land to economic development and livelihoods, and also to optimizing the contribution of land to social development and cultural identity, and also to rationalize and optimize land use and settlements, something similar to what you were alluding to, Senator King. The VG Beach amenities, we spoke about it last year. It's been a long time. We have an allocation for that. It has been somewhat delayed. Construction had started in August of 2014, but it has had to come to a halt due to the delay in the delivery of materials imported from Guyana for this project. Work is expected to recommence by the first week of June. The Wolcott Street and Grass Street Urban Enhancement Project. Mr. President, the main goal of this project is for the Wolcott's Place to serve as a center for practice, training, and nurturing of artists and the arts. A spin-off of this project will be the transformation of Lower Chaussee Road, Grass Street, from its current characterization of economic depression and high levels of crime to a thriving artistic community, something much like what has happened in Jamaica at 56 Hope Road. The Wolcott's Place will also play a central role in the government's urban renewal efforts in the Upper Chaussee Road area. And upon completion, Mr. President, the Wolcott's Place will be a major tourist attraction in Castries, and it will be promoted as a heritage site and cultural landmark. I turn now, Mr. President, to something that is dear to my heart, and that is the land rectification policy. Mr. President, and perhaps most of you here would know, and if you are a practicing attorney or if you're an attorney, you would have come face to face with it, and I'm sure Senator Daniel would attest to that. The land rectification policy. Over the years, Mr. President, there's been numerous and continuous requests from the public for the rectification of the title to lands currently registered in the name of the Crown. More specifically, requests by persons for government to transfer lands registered in the name of the Crown to citizens. These requests are generally received from beneficiaries or holders of deeds and donations and deeds. I'm not going to read this. I'll tell you about it. It's my brainchild. After the LRTP, which is the Land Registration Entitlement Project, which took place sometime in the 80s, many St. Lucians lost their lands to the Crown. It is enshrined in the Land Registration Act. And the Crown is under no obligation to return those lands to anybody. Many lawyers have challenged and has failed miserably. But I felt there was something immoral, and I felt that there was something that couldn't be gained by the country. And we talk about fiscal consolidation and increasing revenue. I believe if we freed up those lands, if we return those lands to those people, there are numerous benefits to be gained. There are people with hundreds of acres. There are people with 5,000 square feet, 2 acres, 10,000 square feet, who have lost their lands to the Crown. So I was able, Mr. President, to convince the Prime Minister and my cabinet colleagues to engage in a rectification program, or to approve a rectification program. And this initiative was a welcome initiative. So in a very short time, Mr. President, if you had lost your land to the Crown, I'm sure that there are some of you in here who may have, or know people who have. There are people who have left the shores and went to Canada, America, England in search of, I wouldn't say a better life, are in search of generating more money or raising capital to come back and invest, to build their homes. And they would have spent some time out, and upon them coming back here, they would find out that the land that used to be theirs are no longer theirs. They have made the money. Now they want to build on the land. They can't. They have a deed in their hands, a title deed. The land register says this property belongs to person X. But they cannot build on it because it's no longer theirs. But they paid for it. They have a deed that's no longer good. We felt that was immoral. It was wrong. It was wrong. So we have decided to return those lands to those people. And we believe that that exercise will bring closure to all land tenure issues. It will serve as a positive spin-off for the economy.
Senator, you have 5 minutes left in which to conclude.
Since land ownership is the basis of a sustainable economy and provides a starting point for future advancements, additional revenue will be generated from the processing of such applications. Mr. President, I am very proud of this initiative. I believe in a short time, persons will have the land. They will either sell land, they will give relatives land. And as you sell the land, the government collects revenue, rather than the land just sitting there in the name of the Crown, and the Crown doing nothing with it. I'll give you back your land. You may sell a piece. Government makes revenue. Development. So I love this one. I move now, Mr. President, to the national site. It's good, right? You like it? Yeah, it's good. I move right now to the National Sites and Services Program, another program that I'm extremely proud about. And this program, Mr. President, has as its core the empowering and mobilizing of our citizens in meeting the national housing need, one person, one lot at a time. What this program is, Mr. President, I mandated the folks in my ministry, especially the Crown Land section, to scout this entire country and find for me suitable residential land. When that was done, some 15,000, based on what was found, an estimated 15,000 lots, house lots could be created. Most of those lots would be on Crown lands, and there are some on private lands. Armed with that information, went to my cabinet colleagues and the Prime Minister and sold the idea to them. They said, brilliant, brilliant. And so now, so brilliant an idea it was, Mr. President. There's an allocation of some $3.2 million in this year's estimates for to embark on this project. We have identified a few communities. In Lafax-Roselle, approximately 24 lots will be created. In Pierre Labrie, 32 lots will be created. In Bordeaux, 6 or 7 lots will be created. And by the way, in Bordeaux, work is at an advanced stage and will be completed in August. And already, Mr. President, to show you the acuteness and demand for land in this country, we have over 1,000 applications for 6 to 7 lots. In Bexar Heights, another 26 lots will be created. Talvan Barbano, close to your heart, a property that I acquired on behalf of the government and people of St. Lucia, 143 lots. Forestier, 45 lots, and St. Jude's East, 163 lots. Mr. President, to date, we have and are continuing in finalizing the development plans for those areas, and we hope to formally launch this program in the first or second week of June, which is next month. We have been working it all of last year, and we are ready to launch this program. So there you have it, Mr. President. I thank you for your indulgence, members, Mr. President. I thank God for being here again, and I want to join my other colleagues in supporting the appropriation bill. I thank you, Mr. President.